Hey guys, welcome back to my channel if you've been here before, and if you haven't, welcome to my channel. So I'm here today with all of my very lovely Rider-Waite Smith decks. And for today's video, I wanted to talk about why I prefer the RWS decks when it comes to my learning of the tarot. And then also share with you guys which ones are my favorite ones and which ones do I not really click very well with. So my very first RWS deck was the, I don't know if you call this the original or the classic RWS deck. But it was this one with the very blue, almost like a picnic blanket type of backing, which I actually don't mind all that much. I know a lot of people really don't like this backing, but I don't mind it that much. I've definitely seen worse backings than this. So yeah, I tried to learn with this deck, and I did not click at all with this one, and my main reason for not clicking was simply just the color palette that is used. There's a lot of yellow, and I know I've talked about it before in previous videos, but yeah, there's just a lot. It's a very, not that there's a lot of yellow, but it's a very, very vibrant yellow. Like, it just sticks out like a sore thumb, and I feel like that is one of the main reasons why I just don't click. And it's very dull to me. Like, if it's not a yellow card, it's not the most vibrant imagery or like coloring to it. But I really wanted to learn using this imagery. So that was when I discovered the lovely and stunning Radiant Wise Spirit Tarot. And the second I started to use this deck, everything started to make sense. I was able to understand the imagery a lot better because I wasn't so like thrown off by the color palette. The coloring in this deck is stunning, and I love the fact that it's borderless also. But yeah, it was so much easier for me to just understand what was going on in the imagery. And it's funny because it's the exact same imagery and the cards are so smooth, and yeah, I love this deck. I tend to reach for this one now more when I'm doing readings for myself, or if I'm just having kind of like a shuffle time where I just want to sit and listen to some music and shuffle, I will tend to reach for this deck. So I have such a connection with the RWS decks because it was the first type of deck that I wanted to learn with, and I wanted to learn with this imagery and style because it was an original. I feel like the RWS is known by every single reader out there. So I kind of look at it like I'm also a big fan of books, so I tend to want to read a book first before watching its movie, because the book, if the book came before the movie, which it usually does, it's the original. It's where it all started. So that's kind of how I feel about the RWS decks. I really wanted to get this imagery down pat and learn with this style. And I do have many other decks that aren't RWS decks, and I love them just as much as these ones, but they still mimic the RWS imagery a lot of the times. So it's just basically, it's what I'm used to. It's what I started with, and I'm comfortable with this imagery. So after the Radiant Wise Spirit deck, I ended up stumbling upon the Radiant Rider-Waite Tarot, and then this deck became my go-to for learning purposes because the imagery was a lot more clear in this deck. So the Rider-Waite Spirit was more clear for me than the original, but then the Radiant was more clear than the Radiant-Wise Spirit. So if we compare these two images, I still feel like the Radiant-Wise Spirit, like the color palette that is used in this deck, is phenomenal. But if we take a look at like how clear the detail is, I feel like the Radiant definitely wins with that one. I can just see like facial expressions a lot easier in the Radiant, and it's more clear. It's easy to understand and grasp the emotions that are being shown within the cards. And I really like the backing to this deck as well. This is probably my favorite backing out of all of my RWS decks. My least favorite one would probably have to be the Radiant-Wise Spirit. I'm not a huge fan of the colors that are used here, and it's just, yeah, it's not very appealing to me. But that would be my only like downside to this deck. So for learning purposes, I would have to say that my go-to now would be the Radiant. And now on to my most recent RWS purchase, which is the lovely Tarot Vintage. So I have been clicking very well with this deck since I purchased it, and I feel like it's because now I'm a bit more knowledgeable, so I'm not heavily relying on, you know, very fine details anymore. Because as you can see in this one, it's pretty close to the original when it comes to like the facial features and like those types of things being clear. But I'm in love with the very like subtle color palette that is used in this one. I love the old vintage look that it has. I feel like it definitely lives up to that name very well. The only thing I find with the RWS decks, and not all of them, but a good number of them, is that their guidebooks aren't very helpful. So the only guidebook within these decks that I have that I found to be very informative and well done was the Radiant-Wise Spirit. So this guidebook, I'll actually use this one when I'm reading with any other type of deck. Like, it doesn't even have to be an RWS deck, it can be any of my other ones. And if I need some assistance from a guidebook, I will usually tend to grab this one. But the rest of them came with very small, like flimsy, very thin paper guidebooks. So that would be my only thing to watch out for if you're a beginner and if you're wanting to get an RWS deck with a good guidebook. I can say from my experience that the Radiant-Wise Spirit is a good one, whereas with the other three that I have here, in my opinion, not so much. And then the last deck that I have here off to the side is the very cute Practical Tarot Wisdom. And this is actually an RWS deck that is meant for learning purposes. So much so that each card actually comes with a little description of each of the cards. And the imagery actually mirrors the Radiant deck, and even the backing as well is the same as the Radiant. So this is like my dream come true for a beginner tarot reader, because like I mentioned, the Radiant is my favorite go-to deck for learning, and then they've actually like turned it into an actual deck for learning. So I would recommend this little cutie deck if you are looking for an RWS deck to learn with, because that is exactly what this one was designed to help with. So yeah, I wanted to show you guys which RWS decks I have in my collection and talk a little bit about why I enjoy using them so much, especially for learning purposes. Even when I'm using other decks, I tend to find myself sometimes thinking back to what that card would look like in an RWS deck, and by doing that it helps me to remember the traditional meanings for each of the cards. So for all my fellow readers out there, do you also enjoy using RWS decks, or maybe not so much? Maybe they're not really your thing. I know that everyone has their own preference. I know a lot of people out there don't like the RWS imagery for reading, so feel free to let me know in the comments because I would love to hear from you. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I shall see you in the next one.